With an enormous bread knife, this is going to go well. Okay.
Class, history, and tradition are huge parts of the British monarchy, especially the cuisine choices, but Prince William's constant refusal to budge on his palate standards will leave you shocked. The heir apparent has always seasoned his table in a fashion completely different from what most people would call a palate delight. Eating isn't just sustenance to him, it's an important part of his persona. But what exactly does the heir apparent avoid eating? What does he have against these recipes? Join us as we discuss Prince William's refusal to eat these royal cuisines. Shellfish, the royal risk the palace won't stop talking about. Tradition, security, and personal preference have always been at the edge of most decisions made in the royal family. While these parameters have been mostly applied to some of the biggest decisions in the royal family, including war, politics, and international relations, they are also applied to their cuisine choice. We are what we eat, after all. The royal family has been rumored to have a strong aversion to some varieties of seafood, especially shellfish. Sources inside the palace claim that banquets in Buckingham Palace have often been held with the palace's palate in mind, especially Prince William. While it may come as a surprise to most people, or just about expected to others, the royal family is especially concerned about what goes into their regal stomachs. Although a variety of reasons have been listed by royal experts and close sources to the throne, food poisoning has often been listed as the most recurrent reason behind the extra care and work put into preparing their food. For some context, seafood, especially shellfish, is quite prone to quick contamination, hence the concerns of the royal nutritionists. However, the aversion to eating shellfish is no news to the modern monarchy. It started long before the age of refrigerators and preserving agents, and some have even traced it back as far as the Tudor court. But the strongest reasoning behind the no shellfish policy comes from a place of safety and decorum. Should a shellfish meal be contaminated, the royal who eats this bears the risk of food poisoning. At that point, the only throne the royal might seat on would be of the porcelain variety, leaving and returning like a wounded ex-lover. According to sources inside Buckingham Palace, Kate Middleton, William's wife, pays attention at whatever goes on her husband's table, keeping him safe from the dangers of unwanted cuisines. Although the prince's aversion to this luxurious delicacy is backed up by the long-standing royal tradition that stops a royal from eating a shellfish meal, especially when on a travel mission for the crown, tabloids, for some reason, just cannot wrap their heads around it and the Windsor palate differences. But if you think his shellfish decisions are quite outrageous, how do you think he handles tomato-heavy soups? Tomato sauce, the acidic dish that challenges royal class and comfort. Talking about cross-continental dishes that have every flabby nostril on fire, the tomato soup variety stands right there on the Mount Rushmore of the greatest ones anyone can find. It has been a specialty of the bustling kitchens of Lagos, the boroughs of southern Italy, to American steakhouses scooping the red thick paste right on the side of their beef. The sweet danger red paste seemed prime for a takeover. However, this meal has always had that one stigma that has stuck with it like a shadow to a lamp. It is almost too cheap to make, hence, it was sold at rather ridiculously low prices. Its affiliation to the African and Eastern European market almost made it too hard to accept it as a dish in the classiest banquets or to grace the classiest palates. But does it get any more classy than the British royal family? According to insiders, this sweet, thick red paste is seen as more than just food for the middle class. The top dog's greatest reasons to have this banned from the royal table are its unpredictability, and insider sources have often reported Prince William, just like his late grandmother, has the same notion about the cuisine. Whilst he had reportedly never really made a comment on its taste, insiders report that he has often pointed out its biggest flaw. This thick tongue saug sensation is often eaten with a semi-hollow spoon, which would have just enough space to fill the mouth long enough to create a lasting impression, scoop after scoop. However, its reddish color and cooking oil mix could turn a little hand tremor into a fashion tempest. Imagine for a second that it tolls off the spoons and straight on the prince's regal garments. Nothing promises a dent of class and decorum more than a cooking oil stain reddened with tomato, refusing to leave your lapels. But it gets even worse, as royal garments are not particularly washing machine friendly. At that point, what happened next? While these concerns are somewhat classified by most as bourgeois' problem, they cannot logically be undermined, giving Prince William's rejection even more legs to stand on. But just how does he handle recipes like garlic and onions? Garlic and strong aromatics, the odor ban of royal etiquette. Royalty requires more than a crown and a bright smile on trooping the color day. Class, elegance, and optics are a brutal makeup of the royal status, and they must be tended to now and then. Insiders have often reported that Prince William takes extra care in considering what he smells like. Scents are powerful as strong messages that often command other emotions, including respect. Sources close to the Prince of Wales have often reported his love for the Penhaligon Blenheim bouquet fragrance, a scent artfully wedded to citrus and lavender and enhanced to command depth with pepper and pine, keeping him smelling as elegant as he appears. Hence, it was no surprise that sources inside Kensington Palace had often described his decision against eating garlic-heavy meals or other strong aromatics. Scents often announce the presence of whoever wears them. Imagine the Prince of Wales serenaded by the smell of garlic after a royal meal. His status as a working royal only means one thing: a packed schedule where he gets to have lengthy talks, host meetings, shake hands, and maybe lean in for a hug. Hence, a minty fresh breath is a no-brainer. Would consuming garlic heartily really set him up for the perfect meetings? The answer to that borders along the lines of no way and not a snowball's chance in hell. But Prince William wasn't the only royal avoiding the aromatics, especially garlic and onions. The entirety of the royal family shared his perspective. If the aromatics can be considered definitely problematic for nasal reasons, how is the elegant foie gras perceived? Foie gras, when William's ethics outrank luxury. One of the biggest strengths of the royal family is their deep pockets, opulence, and a life of luxury. As expected, luxury definitely has its perks, especially when you have the feeling that you could afford all that money can buy, and all that power can take was right there at your fingertips. But sometimes, luxury and ethics fall on the wrong side of luxury, and this clash creates a ripple effect that forces even the most privileged human in the world to stand back a bit and analyze again. Such was Prince William's dilemma. If privilege had ranks, Prince William would probably be crowned king. However, having chefs queuing to make whatever meal he wanted at the mere snap of a finger was not intoxicating enough to bang on about the most luxurious meal on the menu, as they affected his ethical thoughts deep inside. He had often been on the front lines, helping to fight the war against animal brutality, but eating foie gras absolutely undermines that. But just what exactly is foie gras? Foie gras is the fattened liver of a duck or a goose, cooked to perfection. While it sounds harmless from its description, the process of getting a liver from a duck or a goose has often blighted many animal lovers. For some context, a duck farmer created these livers by force-feeding the ducks or the geese loads of corn and fat to forcefully fatten the liver beyond its regular size. Hence, when these birds are killed for food, they are ripped open mostly just for their forcefully fattened liver. which is sold at super expensive rates and mostly only at high-end restaurants. Maybe they are food fit for a king, or, in William's case, a prince. His ethics draw a line in the sand, and he just cannot bring himself to cross it. But foie gras isn't just some personal preference that William had for himself alone. Sources close to the Prince of Wales report that his no foie gras rule was a laid-down marker in his Kensington home, internally balancing the scale between ethics and luxury, preparing the minds of his children what it really meant to be the haves, and the lines not to cross just because they do not qualify as have-nots. However, this wasn't just a Prince William assertion. Rumor has it that his father, King Charles, also forfeited eating foie gras, as the process of creating it ticked him the wrong way, too. According to palace sources, having that many royal icks was just about enough to push foie gras further down the royal menu, whether it was at Buckingham Palace, Kensington, or during another of the hosted banquets. But just like the foie gras, not all delicacies suit the royal palate of the heir apparent. Just how has he navigated raw fish and sushi? Raw fish and sushi. A modern trend meets an ancient caution. In a family like the Windowser, where birth is rewarded with responsibility, it is no surprise that traditional guidelines are also given to fulfill them, ranging from learning to courtesy, chewing with your mouth closed, to choosing what to eat and when to eat it. While this elegance and class create an illusion of control and rights, personal preferences are subliminally chiseled away. Whether it's in making a choice on whom to be courteous to or where to go to school, the crown's traditional demands somehow always win. And such is the case of Prince William and his decisions on sushi and raw fish. Historically, the raw fish and sushi meals are a Japanese-centric meal, where the vinegared rice is processed, seasoned with sugar and salt, and served with seafood and raw meat on the side. Owing to the globalization of the food market, sushi is a popular fix that has often taken over the fast food market and moved around the world as more Japanese people continue to immigrate to other countries. However, not every global delicacy is good enough to grace the tables of kings and princes, especially those born of reputable courts like the British royal family. According to a palace insider, Prince William is a dying breed, a complete student of rules and regulations, and would keep them to kingdom come. Sources close to his kitchen members of staff have often reported that he laid down the marquees to stop the chefs from considering, let alone serving, raw food. While sushi isn't completely raw, especially with the processed vinegared rice, the risk of food poisoning remained high, which was exactly the reason that the royal family banned eating such food in the first place. Although the rules do not completely rule them out of eating these phenomenal meals, as it only stipulates it to be upheld during travel or on a mission for the crown. The heir apparent, who mostly functioned as his father's right hand, attending meetings in his place, shaking hands in his stead, and handling business as he deemed fit, was always on the move. Hende, it was nigh impossible to break out of these set rules if he was never going to have enough time on his hands or explore the wiggle room that he had. If the war against raw fish and sushi was always going to be a staple, what about game meats? Exotic game meats. Tradition meets modern class perception. Royalty and class come with certain perks, some of which involve bending the rules just a little without reaching the breaking point, and sometimes just the ability to get away with almost anything. However, Modern media is a PR landmine. One wrong move and your reputation is blown into a million scattered pieces with no way to put them back together. Speaking of reputations, the heir apparent has consistently made the effort to polish the optics of the royal family, making it as stellar as possible, ranging from his deliberate decision not to respond to his brother's claims in his tell-all memoir, Spare, to fighting for animal rights and keeping hunting to a minimum. But sometimes, the heavy weight of the crown requires blowing off some steam, and as it has been since the old days, dating back to before the Tudor court, kings and princes get a shotgun and ride their horses, hunting game in reserved forests, where royal privileges alone revoke the embargo. It was a bonding period for kings and princes, and a prideful moment when they returned with a kill. At the time, only certain animals were considered fair game, including the deer, the rabbits, a warthog, and many more. Fairly hunting and killing these animals was an acceptable tradition in the past, but the advent of Queen Elizabeth II meant there was reduced activity around hunting and killing these exotic animals. Her rulership set the tone over the years, and it has reverberated into the modern monarchy, where all animal lives are treated with respect, and the media are quick to draw parallels between activities as simple as hunting game to peddling warfare and encouraging violence. There was no in-between, and Prince William knew too well how to work the modern-day media, as he had seen in the past how media narratives can change the true arc of a story, especially since a journalist once dared to manipulate his late mother with fake documents to have her spill her guts to him. Hence, if that little venison could once again drag his reputation and the crown's into the muck, he was more than willing to let it go. According to palace insiders, Prince William never gave in to the temptation of hunting game or having them served as a meal to himself or his family, cautiously choosing image over impulse. But since venison was off the table, how about a drink from a friend? Booze from a friend. Tradition meets royal perception. In a social setting, accepting a drink or booze from a trusted friend might not be the worst thing in the world, but sometimes the risks of getting killed outweigh the reward of just getting high and waking up with a hangover and a headache from hell. However, for the royal family, drinking, although not frowned upon, must not be so easily done with some friends, especially when it was they who poured the drinks. However, this was not simply to scare royals from association, but to teach carefulness and the ability to refrain from being too trusting of what they eat or drink. Many royal courts in the past, including the British and the French's, have often reflected suspicions from food and drinks being poisoned. If a royal court filled with family everywhere that you turn could hold the possibility of poisoning you, what happens when it's a bunch of stranger-come-friends who keep their acquaintances for highlight reels, Instagram pictures? However, these suspicions do not end with Prince William. As a matter of fact, he learned from the very best, his father, the King, Charles. For some context, when the king travels on missions all around the world, he has a bodyguard who carries a bag of red wine for Camilla and gin and tonic water for himself. Every party was a bring-your-own-bottle themed event for him, but it was also a sure way to avoid death by drink poisoning. Sources close to the Prince of Wales reported that the prince's resolve is often tested by the decisions that the king makes. Watching him, being that careful at 78, carrying his own drink around without fail, was a perfect motivation for him. Hence, he never took liberties, not at the dining halls of Buckingham Palace, nor the kitchens at Kensington Palace. Insiders at Kensington claimed that he only accepted uncorked wines from the palace maids and served them cautiously at his table with his family. While he was not being distrustful of his maids, he was simply laying an example, teaching his kids, just like he was taught, the way of the crown. High caffeine drinks, the royal choice to remain clear-minded. Caffeine is the world's highly addictive elixir, used by anyone and everyone to mostly get through the dat, take those early morning Zoom calls without fading, or sleeping while the team lead asks a question. However, Prince William, the modern-day prince with the ethos of a leftist of the old guard, shied away from this modern world elixir of strength and alertness. It is barely news or a surprise that every waking hour of the heir apparent is a prologue to a day that seemingly never ends. Hence, if someone really needed one of these highly caffeinated pick-me-ups, it was most definitely him. But Prince William prefers to live in the most natural way anyone could think of, protecting his body from the harm of these caffeine-laden drinks. For some context, starting every waking day with a lot of caffeine was not sustainable, because if it ever happens that you decide to stop, the body, which has relied on it for so long as some sort of liquid power cell that kept the ball rolling in the morning, suddenly starts to request it. First, the withdrawal sets in, and the body starts to shut down with jitteriness and hand tremors. According to insiders, the trade-offs just weren't worth it for Prince William. Hence, he refused every caffeinated drink, instead demanding tea. The rise of tea drinking from Asia, especially China and Japan, had been introduced into Britain, and by extension, the royal court, since the 17th century. Legend has it that samurai in the shogunate era learned the art of tea making, especially creating a whole class of the greatest ilks of people from all walks of life around tea drinking. Tea had the exact mark that made it a staple in the royal household. It was luxurious, born of history, and not as addictive as caffeine. It was the perfect representation of what it meant to be, almost zero level of dependency. The ritual tea drinking has always been mentioned to help the drinker find zen, an internal peace that helps him navigate the rest of his day, helping him see through the storm in the whirlpool that raged inside the royal family, including polishing the royal reputation, even if it meant making hard decisions. According to sources close to the prince, refusing caffeine intakes and pick-me-ups was enough to set the tone at Buckingham Palace, making sure he is only ever served tea. If zen is such an important piece of the puzzle to the prince, how does he handle starch intakes? Starchy pastas. Why too casual comfort? Food hurts royal. Talking about traditions and precedents, the starch food class often provides a delirium on a plate. Imagine slurping down a bowl of spaghetti, with each strand creamy enough to splash all over the table and the lips. Almost fun, right? But that was the problem at Buckingham Palace. Slurping over a creamy bowl of pasta and watching it splash was not a concept even allowed to their 2-year-olds. Decorum and class were the order of the day, with rather little time to be a child. A former chef at Buckingham Palace, Royal Chef Darren McGrady, confessed to having been told to make sure the meals were all perfectly healthy, meaning that he had to make food that was mostly devoid of starch. At the time of his charge, he mostly prepared the dishes for Prince William's grandmother when she dined alone. However, sources close to Buckingham Palace believed that the prince often dined with her, learning from her what it meant to be a ruler, and often lost to her at chess. Sources at Kensington Palace, who watched him mourn her demise, heard him mumble what sounded like a great promise to keep some of her traditions alive, one of which was cutting down on starch intakes, including rice, potatoes, or pasta. This was the first step to eating healthily and keeping up to shape while running the country, which would require his mind and his body functioning at a required capacity at all times. But would he ever have cheat day, where he throws caution to the wind and simply gobbles down whatever he wants into his belly? Sources close to the prince believe that it might just never happen. If rumors about his mumbled promises hold any weight, then a face buried in a bowl of spaghetti and a tomato cream was representative of breaking a promise to the dead. At this point, whatever choices he makes on starch consumption have a clause to it, as it serves as a reminder of what it takes to be loyal to the cause and fight the distractions as they come. But if a mumbled promise and a family tradition could keep him from a creamy bowl of pasta, how has he survived square sandwiches? Square sandwiches. That one disturbing royal rule. In everyday life, a sandwich with pointed angles, carved by a butter knife, tastes like heaven and has your head spinning. However, for everyone to keep their heads exactly where they are, eating square sandwiches was a letter to the hangman and a straight shot at the guillotine. But why are sandwiches so tasty to the outside world, but rather dangerous to be eaten at a British royal court? Deep in the dining halls of Kensington Palace, sources report that the royal maiden cut up a sandwich into little triangles, and His Royal Highness immediately put a stop to the madness, explaining to his kids why a pointy-shaped sandwich could not be eaten in the royal family. In a family surrounded by traditions and a will to impress, knowledge of traditions and cultural behaviors being taught to kids was just another Thursday. But what makes the pointy sandwich such a problem, and does it deserve more attention than it already has? In the British royal setup, the square sandwiches are discussed as a threat, a message that tells the current monarch that you have come to challenge him or simply make a fuss. These traditional beliefs have stuck like a shadow to light. Sources close to Kensington Palace believe that Prince William's cuisine choice stems from his traditional beliefs more than his personal choices. While these decisions are tough, making it difficult for him to indulge in comfort food, like creamy pasta, he considered them as the little price to pay for more control of his family. Over time, he had finally picked tradition over the recent emergence of aggression, and simply going for what you wanted while throwing caution to the wind. But despite all of Prince William's decision to follow in the same path as his ancestors, honoring their traditions and sacrifices, will there ever be a cheat day? But in a time when personal preferences and palate delight take a back seat to the traditions and cultural impact of the crown, whether Prince William ever finds his will to experience more cuisines, despite the traditional beliefs of his regal ancestors, only time will tell. Do you think Prince William's refusal to eat these foods was purely family-influenced? Could they simply be personal choices? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.